Robert Matthews collapsed into a pool of his own blood, his breath growing weaker as searing pain tore through his body. The gunshot echoed sharply through the dark alley, marking the moment he never saw coming. The bullet had pierced his chest, robbing him of his final breath in an agonizing struggle. His eyes remained wide open, frozen in disbelief, as if refusing to accept the cruel fate that had befallen him. Footsteps faded into the distance, leaving behind an eerie silence. Only the sound of blood dripping and his ragged breaths slowly fading into nothingness. No one came to save him. No one even knew. The cold night bore silent witness to a life extinguished too soon. His death was not just a loss, but a haunting tragedy, etched into the shadows of a city drowning in crime, where justice was a luxury Robert Matthews would never live to see. A tragedy that shook the faithful, the unthinkable loss of Pastor Robert Matthews. On the evening of October 20th, 2024, the city of Mobile, Alabama, was shaken by an unfathomable tragedy. Pastor Robert Matthews, a beloved community leader and the senior pastor of Joy Tabernacle Full Gospel Church, was fatally shot. The assailant? His own daughter. His wife, Tetta Matthews, was also caught in the violent storm, but, by the grace of God, is expected to survive. The news sent shockwaves far beyond the walls of Joy Tabernacle. Those who knew Pastor Matthews knew him as a man of unwavering faith, a beacon of hope, and a pillar of strength in his community. A devoted husband, a loving father, a shepherd to his congregation, how could such devastation strike a family seemingly grounded in faith and love? A life of devotion and purpose. Pastor Robert Matthews wasn't just a preacher. He was a guide, a counselor, a man whose very presence could light up a room with reassurance. If you walked into Joy Tabernacle Full Gospel Church in search of hope, Robert Matthews was the man who would deliver it. His leadership allowed the church to thrive, turning it into a sanctuary where the weary found solace. By his side was his wife, Tetta, a woman equally devoted to her faith, standing as his partner in both ministry and life. Together, they built a family deeply rooted in love and belief. To outsiders, the Matthews family seemed like a testament to faith's power to unify and strengthen. But behind closed doors, something had gone terribly wrong. The night that changed everything. The calm of that October night was shattered when a call came into the police station. A shooting at the Matthews residence. When officers arrived, they found both Robert and Tetta Matthews suffering from gunshot wounds. But the most jarring detail was who pulled the trigger, their own daughter, Charity Alice Matthews. Let that sink in. A man who dedicated his life to faith and family was gunned down by the very person he had nurtured and loved unconditionally. Pastor Matthews succumbed to his injuries at the scene. His wife, though wounded, survived. But the lingering question remains: why? A trail of violence. As investigators dug deeper, a chilling pattern emerged. Just a day before the shooting, Charity had already shown violent tendencies. First, she fired shots at her brother's car. Miraculously, no one was hurt. But that wasn't the end of it. She later tracked down the father of one of her children and shot him too. The severity of his injuries remains unclear. Then, after turning the gun on her parents, Charity fled with her two young children, disappearing into the night. She was found the next day hiding at a Marriott hotel, where authorities arrested her without incident. What could have driven her to such extremes? A mind in turmoil. Authorities believe mental health may have played a role in this horrific chain of events. District Attorney Keith Blackwood has confirmed that Charity's mental state is under evaluation to determine if she is fit to stand trial. If found guilty, she could face capital murder charges, meaning she would be eligible for the death penalty. Alabama's justice system does not take such crimes lightly, but this raises an even deeper question. If Charity was struggling with mental health issues, how did she gain access to a firearm? Were there warning signs that went unnoticed? Could this tragedy have been prevented? the weight of unanswered questions. Close friends of the family, like Shaven Buchanan, described Charity as someone full of love, but also acknowledged that she had endured significant struggles in life, though the specifics remain undisclosed. It makes one wonder, was this act of violence the result of unaddressed trauma? Was there resentment or pain simmering beneath the surface for years? Or was it a case of a mental illness reaching a breaking point? We may never have all the answers, and that is perhaps the most haunting part of it all. A community in mourning. What we do know is this: the world has lost a man of faith, a devoted husband, a father, a spiritual leader. Pastor Robert Matthews wasn't just a preacher. He was a source of strength for so many. Whether comforting a grieving family, offering counsel to someone in need, or delivering words of encouragement from the pulpit, his life was a testament to the power of faith and love. He and Teta built their life around ministry, dedicating themselves to uplifting others. And now, the very community he nurtured is left reeling, searching for understanding in the face of unspeakable loss. Finding faith in the midst of darkness. In the wake of such tragedy, the question lingers: how do you make sense of the senseless? How do you reconcile losing a man of God in such a violent, heartbreaking way, at the hands of his own daughter? Faith teaches that even in our darkest moments, God is present. His plan, though often beyond our understanding, is never without purpose. Just as Job endured unimaginable suffering and still clung to his faith, so too must those who grieve this loss. Pastor Matthews would not want his congregation to fall into despair. He would urge them to draw nearer to God, to seek comfort in His presence, and to trust that even in affliction, there is a greater plan at work. As the Matthews family and their community navigate this unimaginable sorrow, one thing remains certain: the legacy of Pastor Robert Matthews will not fade. His love, his teachings, and his unwavering faith will continue to live on in the hearts of those he touched. May we honor his memory not just by mourning his passing, but by embodying the very principles he stood for: faith, forgiveness, and love. Robert Matthews had always carried a weight in his heart, one that no amount of time could erase. His childhood had been a landscape of loneliness, painted in shades of neglect and quiet suffering. Born into a family that seldom spoke of love, he had learned early that affection was not something freely given but something to be earned. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, it never seemed to come his way. His father, a man hardened by disappointment, rarely acknowledged him, while his mother, lost in her own battles, offered little comfort. The house was filled with silence, broken only by the occasional sound of arguments or the cold wind pressing against the thin walls. As a boy, Robert would watch other children laugh with their parents, their hands held tightly, their eyes shining with warmth he had never known. He often wondered what it felt like to be truly wanted. The nights were the hardest. Long, empty hours where he stared at the ceiling, his small hands clutching the blanket as if it could shield him from the aching void in his chest. He swore that when he grew up, things would be different. He would build a family full of love, one that would never know the kind of sorrow that had shaped his own childhood. And for a while, he believed he had succeeded. He married the woman he loved, and when their children were born, he felt a happiness he had never imagined possible. Holding his newborn daughter for the first time, he whispered promises into her tiny ear, vowing to protect her, to love her endlessly. But life had other plans. The years chipped away at the happiness he had fought so hard to create. His marriage, once full of laughter and whispered dreams, became a battlefield of misunderstandings and unspoken pain. His wife, once his refuge, now felt like a stranger. The warmth between them faded, replaced by cold distance and weary sighs. Their children, whom he had hoped to shelter from sadness, began to sense the cracks in their home. He saw it in their eyes, the same loneliness he had known as a child staring back at him. Nothing hurt more than the realization that he had failed to break the cycle. He had tried, truly, desperately, but love seemed to slip through his fingers like sand. Sitting alone in the quiet house, he wondered if he had ever truly escaped his past, or if he had merely carried it with him, unknowingly passing its weight onto those he loved the most.